Welcome back to HDL Podcast. Today, we're diving deep into the world of natural health and wellness with a true pioneer in the field. Joining us today is Martin Pytela, the founder and CEO of Life Enthusiast. Martin's incredible journey from growing up behind the Iron Curtain, we're going to get into that in a few seconds, to becoming a lead advocate for natural healing is nothing short of inspiring. We'll be discussing the experiences with conventional and functional medicine, the critical role of nutrition. We're going to get into the government. We're going to get into insurance and care choices. So get ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about health and wellness. Thank you, Martin, for being on the HDL podcast.
Honor, really. I love talking about this stuff.
It's so cool. I wanted to start off because I know you live in Canada and you immigrated from Czechoslovakia to Canada. Can you kind of go into your story about how that happened? Was it a child?
Well, I grew up behind the Iron Curtain in a communist state, which was really a police state. You know, growing up, you never knew who in the room was going to report on you. About 20% of the population was on the payroll of the, you can call it Gestapo, Stasi, the deep state. Not today we call it deep state, right? But that's what that was. And so if you were in a room with 5 people, the likelihood that one of them was reporting was very high. So you had to learn to read the room, read the people, and to always watch what you say and how you say it. So that's what I grew up in. So my father, who was a son of a butcher, who was labeled a capitalist and exploiter of the working class for having employed 3 people in his store. It ended up, my father in 1952 got kicked out of the university because he didn't have the correct class background. His father was an exploiter of the working people. Now, eventually he was actually able to finish his school after 2 years of military service and all of that. So anyway, this father is having discussions with me when I'm 13, and he's having to be careful with me because I'm too stupid to know the difference, and I'm being indoctrinated by the school and the government and the propaganda, and he doesn't know whether I have the smarts yet. And so by the time I was 16, I was starting to get an inkling. And I especially got smart when the Soviet tanks rolled in 1968. I was 16 at the time. And then by the time I was 24, I was ready to leave. It was just like, this is not going to ever get better. We're done. People are not willing to overthrow the government, and therefore I have to leave because I cannot stay here. I was just so compressed in the box of the lies. You know, the funny thing, right? Like, they know they're lying. You know they know that you know they're lying. Like, this is based on a lie. So I went to a university. I ended up in the Institute of Economics, and I do have a state board exam in the doctrine, the Marxist-Lenin, I think that's how you'd say it, Marxist-Lenin doctrine of the material, what the heck did we call it? It had to do with some ideology. I forget the words, how to translate it anymore. But I did have to regurgitate this crap to a committee of 3, and I had to sound convincing in my regurgitation of the lie. They knew I was reading and telling the lie, and I knew they knew. And we all pretended that.
Aren't you, you came from that, you saw that, and now you're in, you live in Canada, and you see it in Canada and the United States. Is it kind of the same thing, or the beginning of it is what you...
Well, remember, I escaped on a one-way ticket, right? I became a refugee. I went to Austria, the neighboring free country, and I applied under the United Nations Charter as a refugee. They took me. I'm starting to think, where am I going to apply now? There are 2 ways to totalitarianism. One is through the communist doctrine, where the government owns everything. there's the other way there, which is where the big business owns the government.
Yes.
And here we are.
That's so true. So you were in Austria, and then how did you get to Canada from
Well, I
Austria?
applied. That was a standard process, basic immigration. Back then, it was not what we see now. We were not breaking through the border by the thousands. We just simply submitted our passport and resume and history to the Canadian consulate. And 8 months later, they have processed the paperwork and said, okay, we'll take you.
How do you, as a refugee, how do you get the money to be able to, are you
The
working like
money to
odd
do it?
jobs?
Well, Canada was generous. When I arrived, they gave me a language course. I think it was 6 months. And they gave me enough money to be living in a modest accommodation and whatnot. And when I emerged, I got me a job. I was a healthy 24-year-old. And so I got a job in a sawmill. And I was paid really well, union wages.
Right.
And it wasn't hard. So I became, I came with the intention of integrating. I wanted to become one of the society, right? The melting pot.
Yeah.
I was coming with the intention of becoming fully integrated. And it didn't take too long. Well, it did take a while. I did not understand what words meant, meaning this. It took me about 7 years to not second guess whether I understood correctly what people meant.
7 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. You never think about that whenever you're talking with someone where English is their second language.
It was different. In Austria, when I got out, they instantly recognized all my professional education and whatever. I could get a job like this. But socially, if you're an immigrant, you'll never, ever be hanging out with us who are here. In Canada, it was completely the opposite. Everybody was asking me, how did you get here? What's your story? Oh, come on down. Let's have a dinner or let's have a drink. But professionally, well, what is your Canadian experience? Well, I just got here, right? Well, are you educated? Yes, here's my paperwork. I have a degree from the university. Well, that's not good enough. So instead of getting plugged into my profession, I was plugged into the bottom of the stack professionally.
Well, how did you go from a sawmill to where you're at now, being a successful businessman?
Well, so the sawmill gave me an awesome gift. It was a fully unionized sawmill. So after 90 days, I had full health coverage, including dental plan. So I went to the dentist.
And you're 25 right now, right?
Yeah, by then I was in my 25th year. I went to the dentist and I presented myself with my insurance. And I also presented myself with my 95-day experience in Canada. And so I saw the diploma, I saw the white coat. The guy was very kind. He was not much older than me, really. He was probably 29. And he did x-rays and sold me with his methods that I needed to have 12 fillings in my mouth to fix the problems that I have. And the fillings were mercury amalgams, but he called them silver fillings. He didn't call them mercury amalgam silver fillings. I might have not known anyway. I trusted the guy. So for one thing, I probably did not need 12 fillings, but I had health insurance. I couldn't care less whether I was going to cost the insurance plan $500 or $5,000. Was not my concern. And so I got a whole bunch of work done. The guy sold me on it, and I bore the consequences. Mercury, toxicity. So the next 10 years, I spent going downhill. Like, I don't know if you want the litany of health problems that beset me, but it was serious.
Is this practice is it used still, or is it not being used in any countries? Do you know?
This practice?
It's still practiced.
Mercury amalgam fillings? Oh, it happens to this day. People still get mercury in their vaccinations, and they still get mercury in their dental fillings.
That is crazy. And so it began to affect you dramatically.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the first thing that happened was I got carpal tunnel syndrome and plantar fasciitis. Then my back went. So within about a year, I was no longer able to hold that sawmill job. I was falling apart. I was going to a chiropractor twice a week to put me back together. In, out, in, out, in, out. Because the structures that hold the body together started collapsing under the toxicity of the mercury.
That's so horrific. It's like you see that, you hear stories of this and understand it, especially like you had just mentioned vaccine. I've heard stories of this and seen how people are, their health is failing, but I've never actually like had a real life conversation with someone.
Yeah.
So this took 10 years on your health.
Well, what happened was I started going downhill, right? Like year 1, I started having back problems. Year 3, I would be so bad that I would be sleeping on a rocking chair, face down, my head on the footrest, because I could not sleep lying on my back. So I had to be sleeping face down. And I would roll off of the rocking chair and crawl on all fours to the toilet because I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up. And then I would crawl back and rearrange myself. Now, that would pass in 2-3 weeks after the whatever, and then I could be functional again for some time. And then some event would knock it out again, and I would again be debilitated. This would happen 3, 4, 5 times a year. For 2 weeks, I was just physically out of commission, right?
That's so horrific. And was it this desperation and what was happening to you internally? Is that what caused your desire to understand medicine?
Well, I was puzzling. I didn't know. Like, I did not understand that it was caused by the mercury. I was wondering why, right? So first I went to the orthopedic surgeon for my back problems and leg problems. I went to chiropractors, naturopaths, and we kept, I'm inquisitive. My degree was computer sciences and business administration. So I'm an analyst. So I'm very inquisitive and my IQ is fairly high. So I can get stuff. Well, but I didn't have the information. So finally, after about 5 years of this fruitless chasing of the symptoms without asking, but what's the cause of this? Mm-hmm. I finally took it under my own wing, right? In business, every time you have a business problem, you ask, well, what's causing that? Mm-hmm. Every time you have a health problem, you say, well, that's a symptom. Let's just deal with the symptom. Very different mindsets. Mm-hmm. So I put the business hat on and started reading. And it took me about a year to finally figure out that it was mercury. So then I started reading, well, how do we get rid of it? So by the time I was 35, I was well read and I started digging myself out of the hole.
Just you alone understanding and grabbing knowledge began to, because the reason I'm saying this, Martin, is because I want people to understand that they can take control of their health.
Yeah.
Do you feel like when you look at functional medicine, conventional medicine, because obviously you had insurance at this time and you felt like it was helping, do you feel like it betrayed you?
Well, like I'm not a victim. That's not my mindset, right? I do not accept the mindset in which I do not own the outcome of my life. I mean, if I were, I would give up and I would accept the fact that I'm going to be in a wheelchair, and I would probably have suicided myself at some point because it was really awful. And mercury gives you really dark thoughts. Like I would go to bed many days, many days thinking, I don't want to wake up. This is horrible.
So it played a huge role on mental health too.
Oh yeah. Affects you a lot. But I'm a bit of a fighter, right? So I decided that I was going to find the problem, define the problem, find the cause, find the solution, dig myself out, I took neurolinguistic. I mentioned the hypnosis, right? So at that time, I also studied hypnotherapy and neurolinguistic programming, and I figured out the mental game. That was clear to me, right? And then I started doing emotional clearing. There are most of us grow up with all kinds of mess in our subconscious, wrong concepts. And so I started clearing that.
Did now you began, from your health journey, and it led you to embrace natural healing. What are the differences between like regular or conventional medicine and functional medicine?
Right. Well, so the basic difference is that in functional medicine, you ask, what is the root cause of this problem? In allopathic medicine, or what I would call Rockefeller Carnegie sponsored medicine as we have it today,
right?
It's treatment of symptoms. They are interested in treatment. The other types, which is homeopathy, Chinese medicine, or Ayurvedic medicine, or herbology, or stuff like that, all of those are interested in healing the patient so the patient doesn't keep coming. But the allopathic medicine, the mainstream pharmaceutical box, they think differently. Heal a patient, lose a customer.
Yes.
So they think differently. They only think in the terms of, can I make it bearable so that they are on the prescription and keep coming?
That makes so much sense. Now, there's so many people that have been diagnosed with like chronic conditions, whether it's fibromyalgia or all these different things. When you look at that, does a functional approach, like what does that look like with somebody? And what do you believe when somebody says, you have a chronic condition?
Right. So there are only two types of illnesses: physical injuries or chronic inflammatory degenerative disease. Right? So if you get a bullet wound, it's obvious. If you have a broken leg, it's obvious. And for that, you end up with acute inflammation. And the acute inflammation is there to repair the tissue that's been damaged and then stand down. Like you have a injury, inflammation, period of fixing, and back to normal. With chronic inflammation, which will be caused by states that are caused by toxicity, malnutrition, stagnation, trauma that's not going away, those things are there now for good. And so the body is in a chronic state of inflammation, and the only thing it can do is adapt. Well, I should list it this way. Inflammation has 5 symptoms: redness, swelling, heat, pain, and loss of function. So you mentioned something like fibromyalgia. With fibromyalgia, you have swellings here and there. The redness you don't see, it's on the inside. Pain you for sure have, but the important part is the loss of function. You no longer are as able as you were before. And so the only way out of here is to find the cause. But if you're not finding the cause, then you're stuck in the box that's the chronic inflammatory disease. And those are many. Arthritis, they have the itis, otis names on it. Arthritis, vasculitis, which is inflammation of your vascular system, or something like, well, they also have names like syndromes. Sjogren's syndrome is when your salivary and tear ducts don't work. Or Hashimoto syndrome is when your thyroid is not working right. Blah, blah, blah. I could go on with the names. They name it either by geography or who discovered it. So you have... Right. Anyway, go on. You ask.
No, it's like one of the things that I see is there's almost this, and you're talking about like Carnegie, Rockefeller, all them, and I understand that completely. But there's kind of like you have this chronic condition, you're a victim to this, here's treatment that you're going to be on for the rest of your life. And then here's medicine that makes you sleep. Here's medicine that'll make your brain, supposedly antidepressant, supposed to feel good. Here's pain medicine. But like you said, there's no conversation about what's causing this.
Never.
What do you think? Like when you see the root of disease, like dis-ease, like what do you think that's coming from? Especially if let's just talk about in developed countries, like here in the United States. Is it the food? Is that what's the issue? Like for you, when you deal and talk with people, what do you think these root causes of chronic diseases?
I think it's the Industrial Revolution. Starting in about 1775, we started burning coal, and we first went through the coal revolution, then gasoline, then we invented plastics, and then we invented chemicals. And so there are these layers upon layers upon layers of increasing levels of toxins that are being introduced into the environment. And human is essentially a monkey that lives on a savanna. I do not have metabolic systems in my body that know what to do with mercury, lead, cadmium, volatile organic compounds, dry cleaning fluid, fire retardant, Teflon and his cousins. I have no systems in my body that allow me to detoxify that. So as it comes into me in the air, the water, the food, and the clothing, and the furniture, and the car, and whatever. It just comes into me. So the level is rising both in me, the longer I live, and it's also rising intergenerationally because the environment's more and more polluted as the industrial revolution progresses. So we have conveniences, but we have toxicity that comes with it. So that's one. Two, we have the food revolution. Agriculture has switched from growing food slowly, where, like your grandmother, when she bought groceries, it was food and it was organic. It was food. She may have grown it herself, 50 or 60% of it. So now we're growing the food for the grocery store. It travels 3,000 miles on average. So it's selected not for nutritional values, but for will it survive the transport? Will it look good on the shelf? And will it taste okay? And so when I pushed the NPK, that's the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium fertilizer. These are fertilizer made by the chemical industry, petrochemical industry. They cause the plant to grow fast and strong and big and good looking. But the micronutrients are not there. There's no time. Soils are depleted. We are not replenishing the soils with micronutrients. We are only replenishing them with the big three. So what I'm eating today is probably 10% of the nutrient value in some aspects of what was 150 years ago. What's that mean? I have to eat 10 pounds of broccoli to get a dinner's worth of nutrients. Not going to happen, right? So I'm calorie rich, but I'm nutrient poor. So I'm suffering from malnutrition, even though it's all looking really good.
That's so crazy. And I know your company, Life Enthusiast, and we'll have in the show notes, we'll make sure we have the link to that.
Yeah.
You emphasize restoring vitality. Is that what you're talking about here?
Yep.
In like creating true health.
That's the mission, right? I used to be a systems analyst. I worked in information technology. I was doing just fine with computers and data and accounting and that sort of thing. But my life was going downhill. And so having figured out how to get myself well, at some point I decided I want to share this with people who were like me or are like me. I gave myself the education how to fix it. So now I decided to share it. So that was about the year 2002. I started the health coach business, the Life Enthusiast. So I've been doing that for the last 20 something years. And the goal of the company is indeed to tell people or share with people the message that there is a way out. You need to detoxify. You need to compensate for the malnutrition. You need to undo stagnation. Stagnation is not enough movement. The body needs to move, right? The only time we generate new muscle or new circulation is when we exercise or work physically. And of course, the lymphatic system, which is like the sewage cleaning, whatever back end of the body, doesn't have its own pump. It only moves when I move. So I have to walk, I have to lift, I have to move, bounce, jump. If I don't, I stagnate. And stagnation, well, the best illustration is a swamp. Swamp is a stagnant body of water. It's putrid. And that's what happens in a human body that stagnates.
So these people, I want to focus on these three because I think this is really, really cool. So detoxify, malnutrition, and stagnation. We'll stay with stagnation here. So most people, like you were, you did, computer science, worked with data and stuff like that. So most people, especially here in the United States, get up in the morning, eat tons of carbohydrates, maybe get a breakfast burrito, whatever, ton of sugar. Yeah. They go to a desk, they sit down, they may get up to go talk to a friend or something, go to the coffee, get some donuts, whatever, sit back down. At 5 o'clock, they get in a car and sit. Then they go to their house and they sit on a couch and watch Netflix.
Yeah, they may have,
and then go to bed. Is that what you're talking about with stagnation?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Sedentary thing. You need at least an hour of movement every day, right? So people who physically work, they don't have this problem. But more and more of us are stuck in sedentary jobs.
Yeah, and you mentioned the lymphatic movement, and I've noticed a lot of people, and I'm kind of going off a rabbit hole here, but this is something that my family's faced. A lot of stagnant people that are white are getting a lot of melanoma cancer all of a sudden. It's like, but I've noticed it's like their vitamin D levels are super low when I do talk to them and they get it checked. And then number two, they're usually pretty stagnant. And I know melanoma has to do with the lymphatic system. Do you think a lot of these cancers and stuff like that are coming from this stagnation?
Yeah, it's definitely contributing. In general, cancer is an illness of hypoxia, as in back in the 60s, Otto Warburg was given a Nobel Prize in Medicine for discovering the fact that cancer is an illness caused by cells switching from respiration to fermentation. Fermentation happens under not enough oxygen present. And the not enough oxygen present is either lack of circulation and movement or the pH balance being off, meaning with acidity, the oxygen carrying capacity is dropping. And then the third thing is localized toxins, right? Like breast cancer is directly related to the fact that it's fatty tissue and the body will deposit a lot of toxins in fats or in low circulation tissues, which will be fat, cartilage, and bone. So the toxins are put there. That's.
But do you feel like when you're looking at stagnation with someone, and because you said you need an hour at least movement, some type of movement, whether it's going for walks or whatever. And I know where you're from, and this was something I found interesting when I go to Europe. Like before meals, after meals, everybody walks.
Yeah.
But you don't see that in the United States. Is it as simple as like going for a walk?
It is.
After a meal.
Oh yeah, it is. It is as simple as that. Move it. Yeah. I mean, it's better if you go with your shirt
Lift
off because
weights
you're
or
going to
something
get
like
some sunshine and you're going to make some vitamin D on the way,
that.
right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
So
this is this crazy story of the too little sun, too much sun, right? Vitamin D is really needed, and you don't make it if you don't expose yourself to the sunlight. And yet, we're being told that we must use sunscreens to avoid skin cancer. I think that's an erroneous message. I think.
right. Yeah, I agree 100%. When I realized that sunscreen was so bad is when they were talking in certain parts of Florida where the beach is at, how the sunscreen had come into the water so much that it's killing the coral
Oh my dear.
because the coral reefs are getting the sunscreen on it and the sun can't come down and make it live. That just made so much sense to me. It's like, duh, we're the same way. Our human bodies are the same as the coral.
That I never heard of, but okay.
Yeah, it's crazy. So malnutrition, we talked about that a little bit. You talked about that with, but most people, in what you've seen in people that you've helped, most people are malnutritious. Would you say what percentage of people?
Too many calories relative to the pigments, polyphenols, and minerals in the food. So you at the end of your pizza, your body says, "Feed me." It wants the nutrients. You've already given it so many calories that you're going to put on weight. So the only thing that you will do is the body says, "Feed me more." So you eat another piece, and it just leads to obesity, right?
Yeah, because there's nothing there. Now,
Yeah.
like, how do you encourage, and I know you have a company that does this, but how do you encourage people to get their micronutrients?
Well, it's the understanding that the micronutrients are required, so you need to eat concentrated foods. I mean, at the baseline, it's some vitamins, but you can do better than that. You
Like
can,
concentrated foods. What do you mean by that word?
well, things that are grown organically that
Mhm.
have the pigments in it. So we make mixes of things where you will have chlorella, spirulina, alfalfa, barley grass juice, wheatgrass juice, those important things, right? And then mineralization, trace minerals. Yeah, just high nutrient density components that you add to your food.
That makes sense. Yeah, so like the green drink, stuff like that.
Yeah, like a smoothie on top, like a
Mm,
smoothie for breakfast. That's probably enough to make up for the deficit.
that makes sense. Yeah, with those certain things,
Yeah.
like you said, that high concentration of nutrients. And then detoxify. How long with your mercury toxicity as you began to work on it, began to like study the data, figure this
Yeah.
out? How long did it take for you to detoxify?
It's a logarithmic thing. Once you understand, I discovered zeolite or clinoptilolite, which is a subspecies of that, is a binder, and it attaches these high or large electropositive molecules like lead, mercury, cadmium, and the likes. So that's what was helping me. And now I learned muscle testing or dowsing during my spiritual explorations of things. So I would interrogate or inquire the what's the level of mercury in my brain? Is it higher than 400, higher than 600, higher than 1,000, right? So I would ask. And so it started coming down fairly quickly. Like inside of 6 months, I was down to 10% of the original load, right? It's coming down. So in about a year, I was down to below toxic, right? Like there are these levels above. There's a really interesting concept. Actually, this is worth sharing. It's called LD50 or LD something. LD is lethal dose. So if I give you LD50, that means that 50 out of 100 will die.
Mm.
So if I give you LD1 of mercury, meaning one person out of 100 would die, and then I combine it with LD1 of lead, one person would die. What do you think is the result? Combine. Add LD1 mercury, LD1 lead. What's the result?
Well, it probably, like, a lot of people would think it would be like two people would die, but then you're combining them together,
Yeah.
so it's probably
Yeah,
creating something more
I
toxic.
this is a teaser, right? This is like
Yes,
to try
yes.
and engage your brain. The actual number is 100. Everybody, nobody survives double of LD1.
That's amazing.
So
So,
I wasn't given LD1. I was given probably LD 1000 or whatever. But when you combine that and that and that and that, it's just takes you from functioning to not functioning
mhm.
or miserable. So anyway, the detox process, I would say the heavy detox took about a year, and then I put myself on a maintenance program, which I'm on forever.
Yeah, and this is where your company comes in. So, how would you, if somebody was speaking to you right now and they were feeling, and they say, I feel, super shitty, I feel, horrific.
Yeah.
Uh, how would you coach them? How would you start that process with them?
Well, there are these. Okay, well, everybody's toxic. I can help you spend $300 on a test to
Hmm.
know exactly how toxic you are, or
And
I
they
can
can take
help
this
you
through your
spend.
company.
Yeah, there are companies. You can do hair trace mineral analysis, or you can do 24-hour urine collection with provocation or stuff like that. Tests exist. You can spend money on testing, and then you'll know that you're toxic to this degree. Or, which what I advocate is, well, spend $250 on the detox materials, detox yourself, and decide how you feel.
Mm.
Now, if you're one of those people who can't trust their own intuition, then you can do another test afterwards, another $300 test, and you will know that you have taken the stuff out. You'll go
Right.
from mercury 200 down to mercury at 3. So we'll have you detoxed in just say 6 months. So your quality of life will improve.
And then from there, you were talking about that for life. You're on like a maintenance. So then,
Yeah.
so obviously you do the detox. In 6 months, you're going to see a quality of life, and then from there, you have a maintenance program.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To this day, I live in an urban setting. I'm still inhaling brake pad dust, which is
Hmm.
metallic. I still inhale mercury from the coal burning power plants upwind from me, and all that.
So, do you encourage people to detox probably more than once? I would imagine, huh?
To do what? Sorry?
To detox probably more than once, huh? I mean, like maybe every 2 years, or
Well, it's an ongoing lifestyle, really, right? Like
just because of all the external environment.
you do the major push once,
Hmm.
and then you just there are two kinds of toxicities, right? The industrial toxins, which is what we just finished talking about, and metabolic toxins. Like when you eat foods that are not quite right, you will create problems. If you eat foods that are toxic, your microbiome will start dying in your gut. And that will cause leaky gut, is the common term for it, which will load your immune system. It will cause your liver to start having extra load, which will then cause your spleen and your kidneys to have extra load. So you'll be getting loaded that way. So you need to unload periodically. The most healthy folk will do a liver detox once a year.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, speaking of liver detox, somebody that drinks alcohol, average American probably drinks like a couple drinks,
Mhm.
3 or 4 times a week or whatever. What do you suggest to people that drink wine, beer, alcohol, whatever it may be?
Well, the normal body will metabolize about an ounce of alcohol a day, no problem. So that would be one beer, one glass of wine, one shot. That's a background, nothing. Now, if you of course if you binge, then you're going to cause yourself pretty heavy oxidative stress, aging, right? Like you'll be stressing all of your organs. So when you're young, you have plenty of repair capacity. There's this story that goes up to about age 27. You have a large supply of enzymes and repair and everything. You can abuse yourself. But after that, you start losing that. And every 5 years or every decade after that, you'll know that you're worse off, that these are stair steps down, right? Mm-hmm. So a 27-year-old can sleep it off. A 37-year-old will need 2 days, and 47-year-old will need 5 days to recover from the binge.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you can help yourself by loading vitamins, right? Vitamin C and vitamin B. You can actually preload before you go drinking, so you will have less damage.
That makes sense, yeah.
But at some point, you probably have to realize that it's just not serving you well.
Yeah, it's a poison.
Yeah. At some point, you'll get married, so you don't have to impress girls anymore or chase them down while they're under influence.
Right. Yeah, exactly. What does it look like whenever someone feels trapped by health insurance systems, and they're getting these conventional treatments? Yeah. What advice would you give someone that wants to explore alternative options?
Yeah, that's the tough one. All I can offer is my example, right? I've done these things not because I needed them, but because they were covered. I didn't care, right? A lot of tests, a lot of medical procedures get administered, not because they're needed, but because there's coverage for them. I remember walking to a counter at my bank and talking to the teller, and she had these telltale signs of very large knuckles, right? Like you could see the inflammation in her knuckles, and you could see the pain. She's moving like this. And I'm saying to her, you got plenty of pain going, right? And she says, yeah, I do. And I'm saying, see this? This is inflammation. It's probably wheat and dairy cause, but there are supplements that you could do better with. And she asked me, well, is that covered? I said, no, you have to pay $60 a month for the bottle in the store to get on it, and you need to make some nutritional changes. And she said, well, I don't think I can do that. She was willing to go to the doctor, for which she did have the insurance, and she was willing to take a painkiller that was blocking the pain that she was experiencing in her hands, but she was not willing to take ownership of it and follow the path to health. She was willing to just stay in pain or take painkillers without understanding that this is only going to get worse, not better. So the advice for people I have is just accept the fact that they do not offer anything that's going to make you better. They only offer something that's going to make the pain go away for some time.
Yeah, and I always tell people it's kind of basically just emergency care. Like you had mentioned earlier, gunshot wounds. That makes sense. Like we're really good at handling emergencies. Like Western medicine's good about handling that. But as far as like taking care of you day by day, it's not.
Yeah. Emergency medicine was practiced or improved greatly in wars, right? Because you get a lot of injuries and you have a great responsibility to try to save people. And you learn which ones you can save and which one you cannot save very quickly, right? So the emergency room medicine, that's really the extension of warfare. And they're really good at it. And I'm happy to submit myself to that when I have a physical incident. I'm grateful for the emergency room medicine. It's just that it's like this. If I cut my arm and I sever an artery, if I'm in emergency, I'm going to use a hot iron and cauterize the damn thing, burn it right now to stop the bleeding. But that's not a good strategy for an ongoing problem.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I want to get into, because we're getting on the top of the hour, I want to get into mental health a little bit. We get a lot of questions about this, with our audience. What is your understanding with all these mental health issues that are happening now?
This is dear to me, near and dear. How to say it? What's interesting, in my training as metabolic typing advisor, I learned about pH balance. And pH balance is affected by what you put on your plate. It's the fats and proteins versus carbohydrates. And one will push you toward alkalinity, and the other one will push you toward acidity. What's interesting is that not all people are the same. In a similar manner as we are left-handed and right-handed, we could be alkalized by fats or alkalized by carbs. So I cannot tell you ahead of time which you are, but I can tell you that one of those will be you. And here's what happens. When you push into alkalinity, first thing that happens, you become a procrastinator. And if you go deeper, you will become despondent. And if you go deeper still, you will probably be depressed, like really dark. Like, I'm staying in bed, I'm not getting up. Acidity is different. Acidity gets you really motivated. It gets you keyed up. It gets you impatient. Come on, let's do it. You will start losing social graces. You'll be interrupting people, just driving. And in extreme, you'll go into rage. As in, road rage is a great example of over acidity. Now, that's if it's externally directed. If you direct it internally, it will be more like anxiety. You will either relive your past, recrimination, regrets, and what you should have done and didn't do and whatever, or you'll be directing it to the future, in which case you'll be imagining just how horrible things can be. What if this and what if this and what if this, and you can just make really dark pictures in your head. So you'll have so much anxiety that you're unable to perform. So I spoke to a pharmacist not long ago, and he said 75% of prescription that he fills is for mind-altering pills. So either people want to get out of depression or out of anxiety. And I'm here to tell you that much of it, the non-clinical stuff, is actually regulatable by your diet, how you construct your meal. So if you eat too much carbs and you're depressed, try eating a lot of fats and less carbs. Like that. So that's my first easy fix.
Like pH balance, what is that? Like, is there a way to tell, or how do you know if you're balanced or not?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know by these symptoms that I just mentioned. If you wake up early in the morning with anxious thoughts, you're probably acidic right there. If you are really hard to wake up and want to stay in bed and don't want to do anything, you're probably too alkaline.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And the antidote is whatever it is for you, right? Like if you're the autonomic and you're too alkaline, the antidote is fats. If you're an oxidizer and you're too alkaline, your antidote is carbs. So for one person, it means eating an omelet. For another person, it means eating a cantaloupe or watermelon.
That makes sense. Yeah. And so you think a lot of depression is based off of this?
Yeah. How we construct our meals, if we don't do it right, we suffer the consequence in the mental and emotional health. Big time.
Yeah, I noticed that with people that eat a lot of fast food. They also have mental health issues.
Yeah. And then, of course, some people are more resilient. Some people are stronger. They don't get knocked out of balance easily, while others are quite unstable. So the unstable ones we can support with nutrients. There are multivitamin, multimineral, amino acid type of things that we have available that can improve the stability of the nervous system.
Yeah, I want to ask you one last question. What is genetics? It often gets blamed for weight challenges or people that are overweight. How big of a role do genetics truly play in weight management? And if so, how can we overcome genetic predisposition?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. The mainstream medicine has run off with genetics. They think that they're going to fix things with genetics, or at least fix the genes, right? Like you were born in the wrong body and we're going to fix the genes and you'll be fine. Well, there's another word that belongs here. It's called epigenetics. And epigenetics is what happens with the environment, your interaction with your world. And every genes, the genes are really switches. They are turning on or off. They are either activated or inactivated. And depending on what's happening in your environment, what you eat, how toxic you are, all these things, they will lead to either upregulation or downregulation of certain genes. So, for example, hemp, two major ingredients in it, THC and CBD. Each one of those affects about 450 genes, upregulates 300, downregulates 150, and there's a partial overlap between them. So between the two of them, they affect about 600 genes, some up, some down. Just like that, right? And it's just stuff you put in your mouth. So in a similar manner, you will affect your genetics with your food, with your lifestyle, and so on. This business that I'm in, metabolic typing, we help people understand how their genetic heritage interfaces with foods. So depending on your ancestors, they have adapted to a particular terrain. Like, let's just take an example. The Plains Indian followed the buffalo. Mm-hmm. So his main diet was, let's go hunt buffalo, and in the fall we collect pemmican and we kill a bear, and we'll make we collect berries, kill a bear, make pemmican. So that was energy store, right? So they would have that. They never saw wheat, barley, or corn, or any such thing. So they were supremely efficient at processing hunter food and no genetics for farmer food. So when the Europeans showed up with wheat, corn, and whiskey, there was no genetic preparation for them to manage this. It just blew out their metabolic abilities. Right?
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. And it's like somebody from like where you're from, or like me, I'm basically English or from England, is more like farmer than you would say. Probably. More like if you're from, like, I'm from England, so that would be kind of more potatoes, that type of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Well, England, there are a lot of stuff is coastal, right? So a lot of them were fishermen. A lot of them lived on fish and coastal whatever's going on. So that was partially that, or many were in sheep and dairy. Yeah. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. That's so true. I never thought of it that way. So can someone take this test with you guys?
Yeah, that's part of the deal. We have it available. It answers this question that I just discussed, which is how you get alkaline, how you get acidic, and how the combinations work. And the other question we answer is, what's your metabolic dominance, which is how you gain weight or lose weight, which is kind of handy if you're mismanaged.
Yeah, I love that. And they can go to the Life Enthusiast website. I'll have that in the show notes. They can click on that. Martin, it's been awesome having you on the HDL show. I've learned so much. I encourage everyone to go to your website and to, if they need to detoxify, they can buy those kits. If they want to know about the genetic, or I'm interested, I think it's so cool understanding my weight management, where that's at. Because, like just to understand what you're saying, Martin, like for me, I have to, like, I eat really good. I do lift weights, a lot of weights, and I do cardio, like lots of cardio. I do lots of exercise,
Yes.
and I still have issues with my weight. I count my macros. I have a scale where I put food on. So I'm interested in doing that. So I think
Yeah.
that'll be like personally. So I encourage all of our listeners to go to Life Enthusiast. It's life-enthusiast.com, right?
Thank you.
Yes. Well, thanks, Martin. Appreciate you being on the HDL show.
Yeah, absolutely. Loved it.